You've journeyed through the dark night of the soul. You've had the profound spiritual insight, the moment where the veil dropped and you finally saw through the illusion. So why, now that you're finally awake, do you feel so profoundly, strangely numb? Why has the passion that once drove your every ambition been replaced by a quiet, existential fog? What if this bewildering loss of motivation isn't a sign that you've gone backwards? What if it's not depression in the way the world defines it, but the sacred, necessary, and completely misunderstood phase of your evolution, a psychological death that must, by cosmic law, precede any true and lasting spiritual rebirth? Today, drawing on the deep wisdom of the great psychologist Carl Jung, we will unravel this post-awakening paradox. You will discover why the very structures that once gave your life meaning must first crumble into dust, and how this sacred pause you find yourself in is not a failure, but the biggest spiritual upgrade you have ever experienced, if you learn how to navigate it with awareness. There's a strange and quiet paradox on the spiritual path. We expect the grand moment of awakening to ignite our passion for life. But for so many, especially the deeply introspective, the empaths, the lifelong seekers, it often does the exact opposite. It empties us out. I remember a conversation with a dear friend, someone I'd always seen as brilliant and spiritually attuned. She had devoured every book from Eckhart Tolle to Krishnamurti, always searching after a painful dark night of the soul. She finally had a massive breakthrough. She got it. She described it to me with a newfound, chillingly beautiful clarity in her eyes. She had seen through the entire illusion of her ego, the endless, hollow chase for external success. It was a liberation, but just 2 months later, I found her staring at her ceiling, struggling with a profound inertia, barely able to get out of bed. She confessed to me, her voice almost a whisper, "I used to cry over not achieving enough. Now, I don't care whether I do anything at all. It's all just empty. I thought awakening was supposed to light me up, not leave me like this, like a ghost in my own life." The great psychologist Carl Jung hinted at this post-awakening fog decades ago. He said, enlightenment doesn't come by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. We love to quote that. It sounds poetic, but we rarely sit with the bone-deep truth of what it actually means. Making the darkness conscious isn't a one-time event. It is the beginning of a profound psychological death. It is the death of who you thought you were. Imagine the identity you lived by was the architect who designed and built the entire house of your life. When that architect, that ego identity, dies in the light of your awakening, the whole house it built must crumble with it. The career ambitions, the goals, the relationships, the very structures that gave you a sense of meaning, they were all built for a resident who no longer lives there. Jung would point out that your ego isn't gone. It's just been fired from its job as the CEO of your life. It has lost its map, its 5-year plan, its entire reason for being. It is now a dethroned king, wandering confused and disoriented through the ruins of its own fallen kingdom. This is why your motivation disappears. You haven't lost your drive. You have outgrown the very fuel that powered it. For most of your life, that fuel was the ego's incessant need to prove itself, to be seen, to be successful, to be loved. The awakening process strips away that mask, the persona, as Jung called it. Suddenly, you're not trying to win the game anymore, because you can see it is a game, and without that game to play, your old goals no longer fit. You are an actor who has stepped off the stage and realized the entire play was a fiction. You've woken up from the old dream, but you haven't yet woken up into your new reality. You are in the sacred, terrifying, and completely misunderstood space in between. Jung's term for the journey into a new reality is individuation, the process of transforming from a fragmented, ego-led identity into a whole, unified self, not the small self that craves praise, but the soul-level center inside you that is already connected to everything. This self doesn't care about your old goals of status or approval. It is here to express truth, and so, after an awakening, your psyche begins the great purification. It begins to energetically reject, almost like a body rejecting a foreign implant, anything fake, forced, or ego-based. But Jung issued a grave warning here. Some people get stuck in this phase. They awaken from the ego and fall into the subtle trap of spiritual bypassing. They convince themselves that since nothing matters, they can simply disconnect and float in a detached haze. They confuse true detachment with disengagement. But the self doesn't want to escape the world. It wants to express itself through you. In the world, it wants to bring its unique light into this human body. This in-between phase is not glamorous. It doesn't look like meditating on a beach in Bali or writing profound Instagram quotes. It often looks like sitting in silence, unable to explain yourself to a world that keeps rushing by, demanding that you produce, achieve, and hustle. In our hyper-productive society, this sacred pause gets misdiagnosed as laziness, this stillness as depression. But what if it is neither? What are the specific, often confusing, characteristics of this sacred rite of passage? And what are the first steps to navigating it, not as a problem to be solved, but as an initiation to be on it? That is the journey we will take next. This in-between space, this sacred pause that our modern world misdiagnoses as laziness or depression, was understood by Carl Jung through a powerful psychological principle. He had a name for this process, where things, having reached their extreme, must by cosmic law flip into their opposite. He called it enantiodromia. For your entire life, your inner pendulum may have been swung far to one side, the side of ego-driven striving, of I must do everything. The awakening is the moment that pendulum reaches its peak and begins its sacred, necessary swing back to the other side, soul-level stillness, the profound feeling of why do anything at all? This swing isn't a mistake. It's how your psyche, in its infinite wisdom, restores its balance. In every ancient myth, this is the journey of the hero. It is the death that must precede the rebirth. Think, for a moment, but the caterpillar, it does not simply sprout wings. It must first enter the chrysalis, a sacred darkness, Inside, it completely, utterly dissolves. It turns into a nutrient-rich, undifferentiated soup, a primordial, chaotic goo. That is where you are. You are in the sacred goo. And yes, goo doesn't hustle. Goo doesn't check off to-do lists. Goo doesn't have a 5-year plan. It dissolves, and in that sacred dissolution, something miraculous happens. The imaginal cells, the hidden blueprints for the butterfly, begin to awaken and organize anew. More beautiful and far more authentic form. This is where most modern spirituality skips the hardest, most important part. It tells you to just follow your joy or raise your vibration. But Jung would tell you that if you try to skip this darkness, you skip the gold. He believed that shadow integration, facing the repressed, uncomfortable, and wounded parts of yourself, is the core curriculum of the soul. Your psyche, in its wisdom, will intentionally stall your external motivations so that you are forced to turn inward. You are not failing. You are metabolizing your own past. You are finally giving your soul the space it needs to reclaim the parts of you that you buried long ago. And here is the beautiful, sacred twist. When you stop fighting the void, when you surrender to the dissolution, something strange and quiet begins to happen. Motivation starts to return, but it feels completely different. It doesn't arrive like a thunderclap or a jolt of caffeine. It's more like the gentle, unstoppable pressure of a seedling pushing its way through the dark soil towards the sun. It's not the anxious, frantic energy of the ego. It's not about performing or proving. It is a quiet, steady, inner pull, a kind of soul-led movement that feels more like remembering than chasing. Jung called this the emergence of the self, not as an idea, but as a living, breathing inner compass that is now guiding your life. Once the self begins to lead, life stops being about survival and starts being about meaning. You don't hustle. You respond to the flow. You are not motivated by the fear of missing out. You are guided by the quiet resonance of what feels truly aligned. This doesn't mean you'll be happy all the time, but you will no longer feel that soul-crushing sense of inner betrayal. The feeling of dragging yourself through a life that doesn't fit. Instead, you'll notice you are drawn to create, even when no one is watching. You'll say no to things that look good on paper but feel wrong in your soul. You will begin to ask different questions. Instead of, "What should I do?" you will ask, "What is quietly calling me?" Instead of, "What's the plan?" you will ask, "Where is life gently nudging me?" You begin to participate with life, not dominate it. Your ambition is transformed into a devotion to truth. And the irony is, that kind of soul-powered energy gets things done far more effectively than the ego ever could. Because now, it is sustainable. So if you have been feeling like your spark is gone after your awakening, please hear this. It is only the old, ego-driven fire that has burned out. It had to, so that you could finally discover a deeper, inner flame, one that is steady, quiet, and doesn't flicker and die when the external winds of praise or criticism blow. Carl Jung never promised an easy path, but he promised a whole one. If you are here, listening to this, you are already walking that path. This is not the end of your awakening. It is the true beginning of your becoming. If this message helped you name something you've been silently navigating, I invite you to subscribe and join our community of deep explorers. This is a space where we honor the strange, wild, and sacred path of the soul. In the comments below, share one word that describes what this in-between phase has felt like for you. Your word might be the very validation another soul needs to feel less alone on their own journey. Awakening isn't the end of the story. It's where the real story finally begins.